I put a hat there for money. Put a little hat. Say I need.
Keep going.
I need ticket back to U.S. Or I lost it all at Sands Casino.
I gotta find where. Once I find where my hands go, I can just start playing. Oh my god. Alright, sorry. I got it. I didn't know the buttons.
Very good.
Y'all want to take a group picture?
I think so, yeah.
I'm just recording the show. I'm not sure what it is. Of course, it might also already be over.
What?
Hey, Jess. Whatever they were just doing over there. Oh wow, this right now is the time to get the picture right here by the Mer statue. Except for the person who just walked right where I would think we should all stand. Oh, there goes some lasers. You want me to take your picture by the Mercy line now? Well, on your phone it's Mercy Lion 2. This button all the way down will trigger it.
Okay. You want it up and down or sideways?
Whichever looks better. I open that up so you can use that.
1, 2, 3. Cannot shoot picture. Let me,
Try to have the center part on me, not on the Merlion.
okay.
And then you make sure you press it all the way down.
It just says cannot shoot picture. Here, watch, I'll show you what it.
No, I believe it. That's why it's doing it. Careful, Ashish. Come on.
To get a better sense of the scale of the structures, but also the open space. And over the course of the next few days, we'll move around and through a lot of these places. But what I'm interested in you doing in terms of physical planning, that are connected by the sky bridges, but I'd like for you to recognize that in the planning of them, there are effectively 14 towers, because each of these blocks, what's designed as a block, is actually a set of housing units on one side, a core, and a set of open spaces in the middle, and then another block on that side. Each floor has 6 units, which means each floor on this part has 3, and each floor on that part has 3. If you look down one of the floors, what you're looking at in the window bays is a bedroom, a bedroom, a bedroom, and then a band of living spaces. Then a living space, then a bedroom, 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 then living space, and bedroom, bedroom, bedroom. All of those need light, and that's what's basically defining the outside, or all those window openings. Now, what's interesting, one of the things that's interesting to me about this project is that even though there's repetition in the plan, there's a bit less repetition in at least the reading of the exterior skins. We can still see repeated elements, but we don't see it as just a stack of, that's all the same, and that's all the same, and that's all the same. Which was something which is one of the reasons that this team won the project, is that they were trying to do something a little different and introduce a different scale into the building facade. But it does, and you can see there are different kinds of windows, even though in some cases it's the same use. It's a bedroom versus a bedroom from floor to floor. There are variations amongst the unit types, but for the most part, you're going to see them as 3-bedroom, 2-bath configuration with the living dining space in those bands moving up the building.
That's how the workout equipment get used in America.
I think they can improve here. Is it good so far?
If you're talking to
112 feet or 50 stories.
50 stories?
It is collectively, the 7 towers are the tallest residential building in the world as strict residential. But
private or public?
this was built as public housing, although it's the most expensive, at least when it was built, it was the most expensive public housing. And that caused some problems, some public problems, but
Is it just because it was new, or is there just so much more
because it
amenities?
was different.
I'm not sure if it was trying to build on a historical site where the first HDB was actually built in this area. That's why it has this public attention, and it has this special attention from the government.
Okay, good? ARC Studio in collaboration with RSP Architects.
Is there like a model unit that we can go and look in?
We won't go in a unit, but we'll go up to the skywalk.
No feeding of shrimp.
But we had 2 days of really beautiful weather, like really perfect weather, yeah. And they were like, wow, you guys are lucky because it was raining and pouring and awful. It was such a kiss.
Yeah, it was perfect
So
size.
And so sort of old and just like.
It's a reminder for us that we're, especially in urban places, we should be thinking in sections, that multiple things can happen in the same planned area. In this case, that we could be thinking about residential uses in one moment, think about recreational, think about infrastructure, parking, transportation networks that could be moving under us. So I think it's interesting in that way. There's some interesting kind of moments that are created up here through a combination of ground lifting up or follies set on the ground, these little pavilions, or of course the way landscaping moves through it. One thing you may want to know, when we have parking that's structured, we need to get fresh air into those spaces. We can do that either with openings at the perimeter or above, or we can do it through mechanical systems. And there are requirements depending on where we are in the world on how much air we need to get in. Yeah, and all of this is perforated as well, so that there's some natural ventilation into those. So it's uncommon that we would completely enclose it and rely strictly on mechanical, but sometimes we need that depending on what your constraints are.
It's such a nice example of using space that's usually unused, really, unless you were to put cars up here. But think about how many rooftops there are throughout the world that are not being maximized as they might potentially be. This one's obviously easy to get to, but in places like this where you can get onto the roof, wouldn't it be great to have more things like this? Utility. And reduced heat island effect and all those other things.
So I think, if I recall correctly, I think we need to go down to enter in.
Waiting on that.
No, that's it.
Over here, there's private residential area.
Oh, is that far one? Is it this one?
I brought the charger with me, thinking it'd be
But it was 1,000 people, literally 1,000 Chinese people, when he made that pronouncement. And within, I think, 20 years.
It's like 70 or so percent of the population now is Chinese, maybe more.
Yeah, 1821, 1,000 Chinese living south of the river near Boat Key, right here. 1823, Raffles says Chinese Kampong is over here. By 1860, so 40 years later, Chinese population is 50,000. Wow. All in this area. So it was a time of incredible growth. So remember 1820, 1860. So most of the shop house building stock is dating from 1840s to 1900. It's in the same time of rapid growth. There's a lot of building houses to accommodate all the people that are coming in. 1840 to 1900, and then continuing even in the early 1900s, the later style. The idea of ethnic separation, segregation, has fallen out of favor, of course, over the years. We'll still see it in fact, kind of communities that are, and that one of them doesn't have to feel like we're in the basement necessarily. One of them can feel like we have just a room, or an urban room, or space, and it could be higher than this. In this case, what's interesting is that different from the pedestrian flyover that we saw near Bishan, in this case we have a public space that's connected and continuous on both sides that we can walk through, and we have a car access that's continuous, and we're able to do that because both of them are stretching out much further to accommodate the change in elevation. So the bridge is starting quite a ways that way, And the pedestrian ramps you can see are extending out there, extending flattened steps in this direction. So try and tell yourself that whenever we look at a plan area, that we should be thinking about the fact that we have any number of layers that we might need to create the kinds of spaces and connectors.
Yeah. Pricier under the bridge.
that.
She's not saying I'm trying, right?
Just find out that it's the wrong choice.
So it's interesting to me, instances like this back here where we have a lot of things starting to collapse together. The bus, the people, the bike are all squeezing in. And along the park connectors and places, we get these moments where we have a little greater width and the paths actually separate slightly, separate sectionally usually by a couple feet, and then we'll come back together. Along this stretch of the park connector network, we have a classic defined path for bicycles, the equivalent of bike lanes that we see in the U.S. In the Bishan Park, we'll see a different strategy that isn't about a single path; it's about a network. But here, it's very much like that's for them, this is for you, and it relies on a couple of assumptions that everybody's abiding by it, that nobody's crossing over, and that you're going to have relatively few conflicts in terms of directional movements.
I think another interesting thing is to notice how this edge, I think it's put a score on, it helps as a buffer. It's not that tall, but I was envisioning, well, what if this was just grass, or what if we were just a couple feet closer to the road?
There are areas like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to the highway.
It makes a difference, I think, in terms of the way you feel as a pedestrian.
Well, and this is different than we walked by a section a few minutes ago that was even taller and thicker, right? So this as a kind of manicured buffer versus other conditions more like this that we see up ahead. Peeking out in the distance off to the right is an edge of the interrows that we looked at a little bit in studio. That's it's a secure ground plane, and they haven't so far agreed to let us enter. But if you're in the neighborhood on your own, it's relatively easy to enter.
Try to enter with the residents.
You can just walk in.
Not that Bradley is
But not that I would condone that kind of activity. Did you want to go up a little more and then we'll shoot that? Not that I would. We could, if you want. I think there's at least maybe there's a sidewalk. Let's see if it actually crosses through there. There's a sidewalk connection if you wanted to see what's over there. We can stay on this side.
This side is going to have some shade, the other side is not.
I think that makes sense. One of the things that I was impervious surfaces to allow for more infiltration, so that we had to channelize all of these waterways to try to control the flooding.
It was cool to see the mud. What are they? Mud skippers? Yeah, mud skippers. Like full on real mud skippers. Like the ones you see on
Yeah, there's a large one.
Tortugas. Oh, it's two of them.
Yep.
We're getting left behind.
If I were them, I'd be in the water for sure. This is leisurely. I'm gonna be real leisurely.
Oh yeah, that's in the shade.
Trying to get in the shade.
Now I know how hot it is.
That's like a red ear slider.
He wants to.
That's a red ear slider with messages. Will they have those here? That wouldn't even make any sense.
Pets that got let loose.
That would make sense.
Yeah, just like in Florida where we got a suspension. There it goes.
Dude, I wish I had that turtle like. It looks like
You see the different colors?
Like the giant pile of black.
There's something underneath it that's pushing the mud out, like a mud skipper or something is burrowing a hole.
Why is the mud?
I don't see where it's
With the crab.
moving.
Because it's probably a different color underneath because it's not as exposed to silt and sediment and stuff. And
It was.
one
It
area
was.
of
It's not moving now. It was.
Could be a crab.
Yeah, there's something digging it up, burrowing.
You heard me talking about it.
Yeah, the turtle. He wants food.
Yep, he's waiting.
He knows what type of pistachio turtle that's all.
He'll eat him. Won't be good for him, but he'll eat him.
Probably get some of that down in the bottom. But yeah, there is some trend.
Looking at us.
Really? See, I love fishing, and I think that's why I can get into golf fishing.
Golf your fiance used to play pond fishing.
Is that a golf cart going by?
At this point, I'm not really good enough. I think it would take like 10 hours to play one. So I'm just kind of working on that.
My mom and I used to go there.
Pay $50 and we get a large bucket ball.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I would go over there. It's good.
And then, yeah, and then you can get, if you want more than one bucket, you get half price.
That's cool.
Hey, there's a red Solo cup. We're in America.
That's so cool.
But in this case, you equate what we're seeing as some spalling of the concrete off of the rebar that's rusting. So in the U.S. and in most climates where you get freezing temperatures, you'd have to set this rebar in about 1.5 inches or 2 inches into concrete. And the reason we do that is because concrete is always a porous material. And so moisture is going through it. Now, it's okay if rebar gets wet, but in this case, it's because we're getting it wet and we're getting ultimately some air down into it. We're getting the rusting, and as it's rusting, it's popping the concrete off of it. In the U.S., we would set it down deeper, 1.5 inches or 2 inches, because we're less likely.
This being so flat and open, it just gives you a different perspective and viewpoint. Like you can see the jungle over there in a way that you can't. And it's almost nice in a way to have these different viewpoints, different types of perspectives. Not that you want to necessarily have to leave that open, but it's just something to consider.
Yeah. That would all be a difference. That would all be a difference.
So, most of you, I think everybody knows where we are, but you're seeing part of the Keppel Club over here. Just peeking out from the trees, we'll see it up closer later, but you can see a part of the black and whites that are on the hillside at Bukit Chermin, just straight ahead. This path connects with the reflections, which is peeking out above the trees. Across the way is Fort Siloso and Sentosa, and the various amusement attractions that are associated with Sentosa. Since some of you are mentioning it, the gondolas have actually 3 stops: Sentosa, Harborfront, and Mount Faber at the top of the hill. And I haven't checked this trip to see how much it is. It's a little much, but it may still be worth it for you. You can take it from any of the stops to any of the stops along it.
I would definitely think about the way you treat the shoreline in these areas. You can see there's some sort of existing seawall. And it's not the ideal solution if you want to have any sort of biodiversity. Definitely. I guess that this probably had mangroves along it originally, so for restoration. It's also interesting to note the way they're doing the drainage here too. They've got this trench here. I guess it's trying to capture the water that's going through here.
Interesting. This whole area is crushed stone where the grass is. Where that curves back to?
Double back. So do a little bit around there, or are we good? I mean, we could go
The site
just
ends,
up here.
our site ends about
Yeah, it's right there.
And
slightly taller than these low buildings, but without any towers. So you could say, well, this is a way of making sure everybody gets a view, or a lot of people get a view. But this other is a form, huge vertical spaces like this one over there. You see the cut through at this level. It's allowing the public to move through in an interesting way. So opening up the ground for people, but also for air. Right? So we're getting the wind and the breezes channeled through. He oriented the building massing to reduce the late afternoon exposure from the western side. You can see many different strategies for exterior solar shading, including these kind of huge fins, but also much smaller scale fins that we'll see as we go on. So I think it's very interesting in that way. There's a little cafe over here that has seating that's protected, but it's also outside. And then, depending on the day, sometimes there are different kinds of events that happen on this in this area. That again is protected from sun and from rain, but it's otherwise open and public.
Like outdoor spaces. Maybe it's just that the weather is changing, but you're really getting this beautiful.
Very interesting. What we're going to do, we'll go up these escalators right behind us. And there's some public spaces. We'll go up to an elevated green space and take a look at that as well. And it'll also give us some other vantage points to see.
this is at the top, just about, of the National Library. Gesundheit.
Come together for so this building has a number of these kinds of spaces in it at different scales. This one I think is 5 stories that are carved out of the side. Obviously it doesn't get the benefit of the rear breezes that we got in the central space downstairs. We still get some, but depends probably on where you are relative to the edge. Notice that we're standing, since it's an exterior space, it has to address water management. Typically this would be a kind of open. Notice also that there's green stuff, planting materials, but in this case, instead of putting it down at into the floor system and thickening that all of these are in raised beds so that the growing media has some space. The roots have some space to grow. But they've done it in a way that then creates places for us to sit or opportunities to have a small stage.
The other thing to notice is the use of scale here. When we do this in landscape architecture with a very tall building, you notice that it uses tall elements to help create a better sense of scale within this very large space and helps reduce it a little bit more to a human scale. We do that with palm trees frequently and other high elements like that. Here is some sort of Bonham's Valley Ace thing. It's a different approach.
Vertical space and the rest horizontal space is better, or horizontal space which one is better? So like that in the hotel you saw, there is more vertical and more horizontal.
At a pretty high level without the same amount of insulation, without the same kind of glazing system. It also means that because the difference from inside to outside is much smaller, we can expand the amount of perimeter if we want without compromising the performance of the building dramatically. Of course, it all comes down to the details, the numbers, but that's why we can see buildings like this, or buildings in Florida, for instance, that can stretch and expand or be one story as opposed to 2 or 3 stories, because it's okay to increase those surface areas to some extent. The benefit, we can talk about it from the energy needed to keep it hot or cold, but on the other side, the benefit is that we can get a lot more daylight deep into a building if we thin it or stretch it or introduce these kind of spaces, which then allows lights to power off or to be turned off depending on your systems. So as you're starting to look at a building proposal, I'm not suggesting it for this project because it's a different level of detail, but if you were looking at a building project relative to issues of sustainability, it's easy for us to say, okay, well, I need a compact mass and I need a certain east-west orientation depending on where we are in the world, but it's not always that. We're going to need to pay attention to the climate. We're going to need to pay attention to the kind of electrical needs inside versus these kind of trade-offs. What's my heating, cooling situation? What's my lighting situation? And how can I best balance those issues? Sorry, there was a long. All of a sudden, it went so long. About places that can do multiple things. A hotel is an interesting example because it needs to do that. There's some places, some spaces that are very specific and we wash or we sleep in them. But there are others like this, or like the paved courtyard that we were just in, that need to accommodate many different kinds of events and recognize in just this relatively small complex that there are very different kinds of exterior spaces. We can use words like a different scale, different materials. We can talk about hardscape in the earlier courtyard we were just standing in versus the lawn condition here. Talk about the difference in the edges, the fact that this is lined with planting material, whereas in the previous space it was hard and connected. We could walk directly in and out. In this space we have a very controlled sequence of moving in and out of it, whereas the other we could crisscross in multiple directions. So you might say to yourself that in this kind of project, or in your project, that you're going to create a series of different kinds of spaces for different kinds of things without necessarily having to tell me or say to yourself, this is for this. This is for this. This is for this. Now, if it helps you to think, okay, that's where I'm going to get married, and that's where I'm going to have a drink, that's fine. You can use those kind of prompts to help guide what you're doing, or to help you think about what kind of space do I want for my wedding, or for my afternoon reception, or for my aperitif or cocktail. Those are all fine things for you to think through. But then it's also good for you to kind of let go of those at a certain point and say, it isn't just that. It could be these other 5 things that can happen in school. I think, remember the way that we talked about the exterior public room at Raffles yesterday, and we said the room is defined by a bunch of buildings, but we could change one of those buildings and not dramatically change the space, depending on what we did, depending on the height, the massing of it. Think about this space and the fact that it's defined by different buildings on this side than these sides. But there's something consistent, relatively consistent in the scale of those buildings. This is a little bit taller, what's behind you. But we're able to define the room, the public room, by these different kinds of architecture. We don't have to just say, we're going to work in this kind of formal vocabulary, and we're going to take it and we're going to put it there and put it there. So it's like slightly different, it's developed in a slightly different way from this even though at first blush they're very close. In fact, we get a different reading of the wall, through different pieces of columns, the overhang, and devising walls. All that almost makes sense? How are we doing? Yes, done. Questions, thoughts about anything?